It was a busy week at the Capitol. Governor Kevin Stitt signed the Strong Readers Act into law. That's the literacy push that we have talked so much about here on Oklahoma Chronicle. We're talking early detection of struggling readers, more checkpoints, more reading specialists, more communication with parents, and a measure to hold kids back that continue to struggle. We'll continue to follow it. And a bad beat for proponents of sports betting in the Sooner State. On Tuesday, we told you lawmakers and tribal leaders announced that they had a deal. On Wednesday, that deal fell apart, with a number of Democrats and Republicans arguing and then voting against it. You can look for us to take a close look at that topic in an upcoming program here. But this week, we are focusing on another bill that was just signed into law, the Successful Adulthood Act, which extends certain benefits for foster youth and people who are leaving custody from the age of 18 up to 21. And with us to talk about it here, Jennifer Goodrich, the president and CEO of Pivot, a nonprofit that's dedicated to helping at-risk and foster youth live independent lives successfully. And also Joe Dorman back with us, a former state lawmaker who's now the CEO of the Oklahoma Institute for Child Advocacy. Thank you so much for both of you being here.
Thank you for having me.
So first of all, I just want to start with something. In fact, I read this on the Pivot website. Just kind of, this really puts, in a nutshell, why this is so important. Nationally, 50% of teenagers, 18 and 19-year-olds, aging out of foster care and the juvenile justice system will be homeless within 6 months. That says everything. The challenge that so many of these young people have when forging out, trying to build a better life for themselves.
For sure.
I mean, what is the challenge, Joe, when you talk about, what's the biggest problem that's in front of these young people?
So these kids enter foster care, and the goal of the state is to try and reunify them with their families. Sometimes that just doesn't happen because the families may not meet the metrics necessary. The kids may still be in danger that it would be bad to put them back with the biological families. The goal is trying to reunify them. But we have many Oklahoma families that are willing to step up and essentially give of their time, their homes, their lives to allow these kids to be in their homes, to provide that stability. We have thousands of kids in foster care in Oklahoma. Far too many of them reach that age where they become adults, 18 and a half. Once they hit that, then they're cut off from state services. And so the fact that the state has looked to raise that age to 21 is a huge win to try and help those kids maintain some kind of stability and learn how to survive in life.
Right, and Jennifer, Pivot, really, you guys specialize in helping these young people. Many of them are teenagers, many of them moving into adulthood.
Yes.
You've created places where they can live independently. Yeah. And so when we are talking about legislation, including this Successful Adulthood Act, what are we talking about, the important steps that is in front of them that's going to help them go forward?
Yeah. That age is so critical, right? I have young adults in my own home, and they've had every resource in the book, and they still struggle.
And they still mess up,
yeah,
don't they?
So can you imagine if you've never, and yes, foster families provide some of that structure and those sorts of things, but what we see is a lot of young people at the age of 18 come to our adult shelter, the point, and they've aged out of care, they've been in foster care. Yes, they could have signed themselves back up, but if you've been in foster care since the age of 4, is that something you want to turn around and want more of, and that sort of thing? And sometimes they don't even understand what is available for them. So what I think this does is it strengthens things like making sure you age out with your essential documents and that sort of thing, going from we should do these things to we're now required to do these, and that they're set up for that success at that moment.
And let me pause you there just to mention, so because I was thinking, this seems like such a basic thing,
right?
That you would make sure that a child that's leaving foster care or state custody for some juvenile justice issues, that they have their birth certificate, their social security card, their medical records, their educational records, that sort of things. This is now required because of this law, and that is critical, because without it, I can only imagine things get harder.
Yeah, and I think the presumption is that every young person ages out of foster care. So, and that's not accurate. Like some age out of a shelter, some are AWOL at the time that they age out, and that sort of thing. So they're not directly connected to the system. And I think this gives the opportunity for more time, that once they realize that they've been disconnected and they need those things, that they can come back and actually have that connection and get them.
And Joe, I'm seeing here that this new law, which was signed by the governor this past week, that it also keeps access, again, until they turn 21. access to things like job readiness, some support for housing, educational help, life skills training, that sort of thing.
That's exactly right.
And that's an important thing. Is this a good law in that way?
It absolutely is, and we need to be clear, it's not going to be for every child in foster care. They do have to maintain that enrollment in secondary education, or go to a career tech, or be in some job readiness program. They have to meet certain metrics to qualify for this program. And so we want to make sure that these children receive that support building up to this. So hopefully as many as possible will be able to continue into this and have that extra amount of time to learn those life skills and job skills.
And just so I know, putting this in context, this is the Successful Adulthood Act, but there was already a Successful Adulthood program in Oklahoma that this is kind of adding to. Am I correct on that?
That is correct. So much of this came from federal funds, from Chafee dollars, that would allow for support for these young foster kids to be able to go through different programs and receive support services. This is adding on. President Pro Tem of the Senate, Lonnie Paxton, authored this bill, and adding on those 3 extra years is giving that additional time. And we have wonderful programs, Pivot, Youth Villages in Oklahoma, other programs that work so hard to help these kids see that opportunity for success. This is just going to build even more.
And this builds more accountability for certain agencies, right? DHS has very specific things that they now have to do. The Office of Juvenile Affairs as well. This adds in. What does this law not do, Jennifer, for people that are kind of trying to follow? Like, what are still some of the sticking points that's where kids can fall through the cracks?
Like Senator Paxton also authored 1806, I believe it is, that would extend it, I believe, to the age of 23. And that I think the more time we can give, the better off we are for these young people. Again, we know through brain development that your frontal lobe isn't developed until the age of 25. So the more time that we can give young people, especially in these systems that have experienced trauma, the better off they're going to be in the long run. Everything is also only as good as the funding that we put behind it, and then the services that we can connect them to, right? So I can say, let's get all these documents, let's connect them to jobs, let's connect them to housing, but if there's no housing available, like, how good is that? So I think strengthening the resources and the systems by how we get those young people to those resources is also still needed.
So going forward, like, you know, as we continue to look at this issue, what are some other things, and I know you kind of talked about it, are there specific measures that you would like to see happen? And Joe, you can jump in on this as well.
Yeah, like definitions around permanency and the numbers that drive the things that we do. I think it's important. Like, what is permanency? Does it mean that you were homeless at the age of 18 when you aged out, or what happened when you were 19, 20? You know what I'm saying? Like, what
are there are there some gray areas where?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think when we're able to strengthen those things and we can look at the longer term impact, what I do like is that there's opportunities now when you get permanency at the age of 16 and after, that you can still engage in these systems. I think that's going to be huge for young people. I read an article recently where a young person was trying to choose between being adopted by someone and then paying for college, and that wasn't going to make them eligible for something if they did this. And people shouldn't have to choose between permanency.
If they chose a family.
Yes,
so when you say permanency, are you talking about
family connection, kinship placement, those sorts of things? Having to choose between those two things at that age, being so close to that age, shouldn't be a choice that they should have to make.
They should be able to choose both.
Yeah, so some of these things could help impact that, I think, in the long run. So, but what I do love is that our state is looking at continues to look at what are the ways that we can support young people that are aging out of care, who by no fault of their own have found themselves in these systems. And so I think that's very heartening for our state.
Joe, what are some things that you would like to see, maybe legislative wise, in the years to come? Because you spent a lot of time at the Capitol working with these lawmakers.
So we did have one other bill that passed this year that was a moral victory that really does help in a certain situation. Oftentimes you hear about when kids are taken away from their home, their belongings are packed up in trash bags. The legislature passed a law this year that would require duffel bags be given to those kids. They put in $250,000 for this first step of this program, so at least it will provide a little bit of dignity for these kids when they're being removed from the home, because it's already traumatic enough for them to be taken away from their family. But the fact that they're
Possessions
are thrown into a black garbage bag.
and then handed to this young
them.
person. And those are those little things that people like myself who don't, think about this issue all the time. You guys are in this issue all the time. I would never have thought about that as something. And that's probably where advocates probably step up. Lawmakers probably aren't thinking about that naturally either. Somebody has to tell them there's a better way to do this.
There are a lot of nonprofits out there that work to provide bags for foster care. And so now they will be able to shift and hopefully provide those items, the toiletries and other things could go in those bags. And so it's going to be a good partnership between the state and those nonprofits. One thing that we did not see pass this year, I really wish would have, was a $5 per day rate increase for providing those foster families the additional funds. It's roughly about $17.72 per child per day, and you just can't provide for children with that amount of money. And these foster families, they're signing up to provide this service. And so if we could provide those additional dollars, they could meet that inflation rate that we've seen.
Right.
And we are struggling to recruit foster families. So this would have helped. Nick Archer authored that bill. We couldn't get it across the finish line because of the funding questions. President Trump said that he wants to cut social services back by 10% to fund the military and wars. These are some of the things we're worried about what could happen next year. So we're going to be fighting to make sure those dollars are in place.
And we got to leave it right there. Joe Dorman, the CEO of the Oklahoma Institute for Child Advocacy, and Jennifer Goodrich, the president and CEO of Pivot. Thank you so much to both of you for being here. We really appreciate it.